My parents left me stranded at the airport as a joke, so I took everything from them and walked away, and I knew something was off the second the woman behind the airline counter narrowed her eyes at the screen, hesitated just long enough to make my stomach tighten, then spoke with that flat, rehearsed tone employees use when they don't want to deal with someone becoming emotional. "I'm sorry, sir, but it looks like this reservation was canceled," she said, already glancing past me like I was no longer her problem. For a second, I didn't even register the word. Canceled? What the hell did she mean canceled? I'd confirmed the flight 3 days ago. My mother had forwarded me the itinerary herself. Lisbon for New Year's, a family memory trip she'd called it. I pulled up the email immediately, scrolling quickly, jabbing the screen with my finger like that would somehow make it more valid. "No," I said, holding it up to her. "There has to be some mistake. This ticket was booked by my parents. I'm supposed to be flying with them today." She barely gave the phone a glance before she shook her head again, indifferent. "I see the reservation number here, but it was canceled 2 days ago." My throat went dry so fast it felt like I'd swallowed sand. 2 days ago. I didn't need to ask who had canceled it. Only one person could access the reservation, my mother. She told me not to worry about anything, said the flights were taken care of, and all I had to do was show up. As I stood there at the counter, people weaving around me, checking bags, laughing, boarding without a care in the world, my phone buzzed in my hand. One notification. Just one. From Mom. No explanation, no apology. Just, "Hope you enjoy your taxi ride home, loser. Happy New Year." For a long second, I just stared at the message. I must have read it 5 or 6 times, trying to process the pettiness, the cruelty, the finality. This wasn't a joke. There was no winking emoji, no punchline. Just her delight at leaving me stranded like a forgotten bag at baggage claim. You'd think I'd be shocked, but I wasn't. Not really. That's the worst part. This wasn't the first time my family had made me the punchline. I was the extra, the backup plan, the one they called when something broke or when Jenna needed tuition covered and their bank accounts suddenly went silent. I was the brother who gave without question, the son who picked up the slack, the invisible wall they leaned against whenever things went sideways. My sister Jenna was the star. She always had been. She got her first car at 16, a brand new sedan with all the bells and whistles, while I inherited my uncle's rusted-out Chevy that broke down twice a month. They threw her a graduation party big enough to require catering, and when I graduated 2 years earlier, my mom slapped a grocery store cake on the kitchen counter and said, "At least you're not in jail like your cousin." The bar was underground when it came to me. Still, even for them, this was a new low. I clenched my jaw so tightly it ached, took a deep breath, and typed back one line. "There's a surprise for you when you get back." I hit send and watched the read indicator pop up almost instantly. Less than 10 seconds later, the phone rang. Mom, of course. I didn't answer. She called again. Then my dad. Then Jenna. I let them all go to voicemail. They thought they'd humiliated me, thought I'd panic and call them crying, maybe beg to be let back in on their little vacation. What they didn't realize was that this wasn't the collapse of anything. This was the start. Because while they'd been smug and careless and cruel, I'd been quietly preparing for this exact moment for years. This wasn't defeat. This was a reset. I walked out of the airport with my hands in my coat pockets, letting the cold Boston wind bite into my face, welcoming it like a slap. Most people in my position would have been furious, maybe even broken. But I wasn't. I was calm. I was smiling. They thought they'd won. Thought I'd go back to my apartment with my tail tucked, scrambling to fix their mess like always. But they had no idea how long I'd been waiting for the right moment to break the chains they spent years tightening around my neck. Every Christmas where they forgot to buy me a gift, but gave Jenna diamond earrings. Every birthday, they claimed they were too busy to celebrate. Every time they told me, "You're the strong one, Marcus, you can handle it." I had handled it. And now it was time for them to learn what that meant. The second I got home, I went straight to my desk and pulled out a thick folder I'd been building in secret. Inside were 2 sets of documents. First, the title for the car I had given my mom last year for her birthday. A surprise she'd cried over, called me the best son, and then used to run errands for Jenna like I didn't exist. The car was still in my name. Second, paperwork for the joint savings account my father had guilted me into opening for emergencies. Emergencies, apparently, included their last-minute weekend getaway to Atlantic City, Jenna's apartment deposit, and the time Dad accidentally paid his golf membership with our shared funds. 90% of the money in that account? Mine. Always had been. Within 1 hour, the car was listed online. Within 2, a buyer had offered cash and set a meeting time. I accepted. No negotiation. Meanwhile, I logged into the bank account, transferred every last cent into my personal one, and shut down the joint access. It was all clean, all legal, all mine. When my mom called again, I was already en route to finalize the sale. I didn't answer. I didn't even flinch. That night, after I'd pocketed $6,000 in cash and dropped off the keys to a very happy buyer, I sat in my apartment, opened a beer, and looked around at the life I was about to shed like dead skin. They had played their little joke. They thought they'd left me humiliated, but they didn't know what I had in store. They had no idea that while they were off sipping overpriced wine and toasting the new year, I had already set the first domino falling. When they came home, there would be no welcome wagon. Just silence, emptiness, and consequences, the kind they couldn't ignore. The morning after I sold the car, I woke up to a dozen missed calls, voicemails, and texts, all dripping with panic disguised as outrage. The smug tone from the airport was gone, replaced now by shrieking demands and hollow accusations that did nothing but make me laugh into my coffee. "Where's the car?" My mom texted, like I'd parked it in another dimension by accident. "You had no right to touch that money," my dad wrote, as if that account hadn't been filled almost entirely by my deposits over the years. Jenna's message was the worst attempt of all, some fake concern line about how Mom was really upset, and I needed to stop this. As if she hadn't laughed when they left me stranded like a dog at the pound. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't even feel the urge to explain. They didn't deserve explanations anymore. They had made me the family's punching bag for decades, and now they were finally choking on the consequences. While they stewed in whatever luxury hotel they were crashing in, sipping cocktails by the pool and pretending this whole thing was just a quirky family misunderstanding, I was already executing the next step in my plan. I powered up my laptop and opened a draft email I'd written 2 weeks earlier. Subject line: resignation. It wasn't long, just 2 tight paragraphs, but every word felt like a fuse being lit. I'd worked at my father's construction firm for almost 9 years, dragged into it straight out of college with promises of real experience and future ownership. Those were just words he dangled like treats in front of a dog. The truth was I'd been running the day-to-day operations since I was 24, while he schmoozed clients and left Jenna to manage the company's laughable social media presence like it was some kind of startup. He never gave me credit, never paid me what I was worth, and he sure as hell never planned to hand over the business, no matter what he'd hinted at during Christmas dinners. But while he was busy telling me to be grateful for a paycheck and a job that no one else would hire me for, I was making quiet connections with his competition. I networked. I sent out resumes. I met with a project manager from Riverview Development, the firm Dad hated most because they always landed the contracts he thought he was entitled to. That manager offered me a job 3 months ago. A better salary, more responsibility, full benefits, and actual appreciation. I waited to accept because I wanted to make sure my exit left a crater. And this was the time. I read through the draft one last time, then hit send. It was done. Within 15 minutes, I had a reply. "We're thrilled to welcome you aboard. You start next Monday." I shut the laptop and smiled so hard my jaw ached. The real fun started when their flight landed 3 days later. I was making dinner when the banging started at my door, my mother's shrill voice cutting through the hallway like a blade. "Open this door right now, Marcus. We need to talk." I took my time. Let her knock. Let the tension build. When I finally opened it, I was met with her flushed, furious face and my dad looming behind her like he thought he still scared me. Jenna stood off to the side, pretending she didn't care, arms crossed, and smirking like she'd seen this all before. I leaned against the frame, calm as ever, like I didn't have a front row seat to their unraveling. You sold my car, my mother snapped, as if I'd broken a family heirloom and not legally sold a vehicle I still held the title for. I didn't flinch. No, I said, I sold my car. The one I paid for. The one I insured. The one still under my name. She actually recoiled, like I'd hit her. You bought that for me, she hissed. I shrugged. And now I've taken it back. Because I finally realized I don't owe you anything. Her fists clenched at her sides. She wasn't used to me talking like this. None of them were. My dad stepped forward, his tone low and theatrical, like he thought it would intimidate me just like it had when I was 15. We were joking. You're acting like a spoiled brat. You're throwing a tantrum over a harmless prank. I met his eyes, steady. You mean stranding me at the airport like garbage? That's your idea of harmless? Leaving me alone on New Year's while you laughed about it in some luxury suite. Jenna rolled her eyes. Oh, come on. You were fine. It's not like you couldn't figure it out. I turned to her, amused. You're right. I figured it out. And I figured out I don't need any of you. That's when the panic started to creep into their expressions. Not fear for me. Fear of what I'd taken away from them. The stability I provided. The backup plan I always represented. They were losing it and finally starting to realize. My dad's voice went sharp. Let's not be stupid. You've made your point. Now get over yourself and come back to the business. I smiled. Already took a better offer. Left 2 days ago. I work for Riverview now. The silence that followed was glorious. My father's face went pale. Jenna's smirk slipped. My mother's mouth hung open for a moment before she stammered. You can't do this to us. I tilted my head. I already did. And you'll be feeling it real soon. Then I closed the door. Slowly. Deliberately. The echo of it slamming shut behind me felt like a door closing on 31 years of being their utility boy. I stood there for a while, listening as they shouted outside. Jenna calling me dramatic, Dad muttering curses, Mom threatening everything short of legal action. But I didn't move. Didn't respond. I was done being their safety net. They thought cutting me off from the vacation would be the final insult. They had no idea it would be the start of their collapse. The silence that followed that final door slam was the sweetest thing I'd heard in years. Not because I didn't expect the storm that would follow, but because I knew, for once, I had nothing left to lose. For days, I didn't hear a thing from any of them. No angry texts, no half-hearted apologies, not even one of Jenna's smug jabs dressed up as jokes. That silence told me exactly what I already knew. They were scrambling, not sure how to fix what they'd broken without actually admitting they were wrong. And to be honest, I was fine with that. Better than fine. I was thriving. I spent the next few days catching my breath, something I hadn't done in years without someone expecting me to get back up and keep carrying their weight. For the first time since college, I wasn't waking up to a mountain of obligations I never asked for. The construction firm didn't call because they knew I wasn't coming back. The savings account was mine again. The car was gone. All their leverage had evaporated in the time it took for a single flight to take off without me. I kept checking my phone out of habit, waiting for the guilt campaign I was sure was coming. And it did, but not from who I expected. It started with Uncle Leonard, my dad's older brother. He was always the calm voice in the family, the one who showed up at barbecues in a golf shirt and made passive-aggressive comments while pouring drinks too strong for anyone to enjoy. He called me and asked to meet in person, said it was important, said he just wanted to talk man-to-man. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a corner cafe on the east side of the city, the kind of place where every table wobbled and the music was always a little too loud to relax. He arrived 10 minutes early and already looked like he'd rehearsed his whole speech. I'm not here to pick sides, he started, like that was some kind of neutral stance in a war he helped fuel for decades. But you have to admit, things have gotten out of hand. I didn't say anything. I just waited. He sipped his coffee and looked at me the way people do when they're trying to remember if you've always been this stubborn or if this is something new. Your parents made a mistake, he said carefully, as if calling it that would somehow soften what they did. But you've made your point, Marcus. You've proven whatever you needed to prove. Now it's time to be the bigger man. I finally leaned forward, hands folded on the table. Where was this energy when they left me stranded at the airport for a joke? He sighed like I was being unreasonable, like I was dragging this out for effect. They didn't mean to hurt you. It was supposed to be funny. You know how your mom is. That sentence alone almost made me laugh out loud. Yeah, I said quietly. I do know how she is. And that's exactly why I'm done. He tried again, this time with the familiar angle. Family, forgiveness, obligation. They're your parents, Marcus. You don't want to carry this anger forever. You don't want to burn a bridge you might need to cross later. I looked him dead in the eye and said the one thing I hadn't said aloud until that moment. That bridge burned a long time ago. I'm just finally walking away from the ashes. There was nothing left to say after that. He nodded like he understood, but I knew he didn't. Not really. Not the way I needed him to. And honestly, that was fine too. When I got home, my phone buzzed again. A message from my mom this time. We need to talk. Please. I let it sit unread for hours before finally opening it. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just vague emotional bait. That night, another text came, this one sharper. Your father's business is in trouble. You know we're shorthanded. You know how much we counted on you. There it was, not love, not regret, not remorse, just a plea disguised as concern. I didn't reply, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew if I gave them even 1 inch, they'd take the whole road. An hour later, Jenna chimed in. Wow, so you're really just gonna let mom and dad drown? That's cold. I didn't think even you were that selfish. I actually laughed when I read that. Me? Selfish? I'd spent most of my adult life cleaning up after her mistakes, covering for her bad grades, her missed rent, her credit card debt, while she soaked up praise and played the victim every time something didn't go her way. I typed out one short message. Me? I learned from the best. Then I blocked her. That was the last message I sent her. Haven't unblocked her since. A few days later, my aunt called me. Not my mother's sister. She was a lost cause. No, this was Aunt Reba, my dad's younger sister. The only one in the family who had ever treated me like an actual person and not just the live-in problem solver. She called late, her voice tired but direct. What exactly did you do, Marcus? I didn't even have to ask what she meant. I could hear the frustration in her tone. Your mom's in tears, your dad's pacing like a lunatic, and Jenna's acting like the world is ending. I didn't even try to hide my amusement. Sounds rough. Maybe they should have thought of that before they decided to screw me over for fun. She didn't argue, just sighed heavily. Your dad can't keep up without you. He's buried in work, and they can't find anyone good to replace you. He's desperate, even if he won't admit it. I leaned back on the couch, letting that wash over me. So let them figure it out. It's not my job anymore. There was a pause, then something I didn't expect. I'm proud of you, she said softly. I know how they treated you. I know this wasn't easy, but you're doing what they never thought you would. You're standing up for yourself. That caught me off guard more than anything else, because no one had ever said that to me before. Not once. Not after all the years of holding everyone else together while falling apart inside. When we hung up, I just sat there in silence for a long time. And for the first time in my life, I felt weightless. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I wasn't hoping they'd come around or praying they'd apologize. I didn't care. I was done. And for the first time ever, that actually felt like freedom. Weeks went by, and for once in my life, peace didn't feel like something I had to beg for. It just existed. Quiet mornings, quiet evenings, no unsolicited messages, no toxic obligations, no emotional blackmail dressed up as family concern. My phone stayed still. The silence that used to make me nervous now felt like the softest thing I'd ever touched. I wasn't checking over my shoulder anymore, waiting for someone to hand me another crisis to clean up. I finally had time to breathe, and more than that, I had space to think about my own life without factoring in theirs. With the money I took back from the joint account and the profit from the car sale, I did something I never thought I'd be able to do on my own. I moved. Nothing extravagant. Just a clean, quiet one-bedroom apartment in a better neighborhood with decent lighting and no mold creeping in through the bathroom ceiling. For the first time in over a decade, I could look around my space and know that it was entirely mine. Every bill paid with my own effort. Every piece of furniture bought without guilt. No one else had a say in it. No one else could ruin it. My new job turned out to be everything my father's company wasn't: organized, respectful, rewarding. I wasn't stuck managing incompetent cousins or fixing disasters my dad refused to acknowledge. I had structure. I had coworkers who actually valued my input. My new boss, Darren, was nothing like my father. He didn't try to intimidate people into obedience. He listened. Within 2 months, he started handing me more responsibility. By the end of the third, I was managing my own team. When he pulled me into his office to offer me a raise, I actually choked up. Not because of the money, but because it felt earned. It felt real. I also started doing something I never had time or energy for before: living. I took a weekend trip to Vancouver. Nothing fancy, just a camera, a rented car, and the kind of scenery you can't find when your life is being micromanaged by people who only see you as useful when they're in trouble. I signed up for a photography course I'd put off since I was 21. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post about it. I just went. Learned how to actually use the DSLR that had been gathering dust in my closet since college. It felt strange at first, doing something that had no connection to productivity or anyone else's expectations, but then it started to feel necessary. Somewhere in that space between work and learning and building a new version of myself, I met Camille. It wasn't some movie moment where the world paused and orchestral music swelled. We met through a mutual friend who invited both of us to a game night that I almost bailed on out of habit. But she was sharp, funny, and didn't seem remotely impressed by status or family drama. She asked questions that didn't feel invasive. She listened without judgment. The second time we talked, she made an offhand joke about how some people only exist to remind you of what not to become, and I laughed harder than I had in months. We started seeing each other casually, then not so casually, then regularly, and something about being around her made everything that happened feel further away. She had her own scars, her own complex family history, but she didn't let it define her. Being with someone who understood that kind of damage without trying to fix it was new for me. So was being treated like a person who mattered even when I wasn't fixing something. She didn't need saving. She didn't expect me to carry her weight. She just wanted me to show up honestly, and that was enough. Meanwhile, the updates about my family came whether I wanted them or not. My Aunt Reba, bless her, still kept me in the loop, though she knew better than to push me toward reconciliation. The business is circling the drain, she told me one afternoon, voice low like she was reporting classified intel. Your father's buried in invoices he doesn't understand. Jenna moved back in, and your mom's acting like she's been widowed by your absence. I didn't say much, just nodded. They're scared, she added. They won't admit it, but they're scared. They never thought you'd walk away. I didn't get any satisfaction from hearing that. Not the way people think. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice. It was just inevitable. You don't spend your life treating someone like they're disposable and then act surprised when they finally leave the trash heap behind. Then one day, months after the last chaotic visit, I got a call from an unknown number. For a moment, I thought about letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. Marcus. The voice on the other end was hesitant, but familiar. Jenna. I almost hung up right there, but something told me to let her speak. Things have been bad, she said, like she was slowly easing into a request she hadn't figured out how to frame yet. I thought maybe we could catch up. Grab coffee or something. I didn't respond immediately. Let the silence stretch just long enough for her to feel it. Then I asked, and this sudden interest in catching up wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that you all need money? She gave a weak laugh that died halfway through. Come on, it's not like that. But it was. Of course it was. I could hear it in her voice, the panic dressed up as casual interest, the desperation hiding behind small talk. I actually smiled, not out of malice, but because that call confirmed something I'd needed to know deep down. I'd made the right choice. I didn't owe them anything. Not my time. Not my money. Not my peace. I said, you know what? I'm glad you called, because now I'm absolutely sure I'm done. Then I ended the call, blocked the number, and just like that, the last rope tying me to that old life snapped clean in half. There was a time in my life where I believed I'd never survive without them, that no matter how cold they were, no matter how overlooked I felt, I had to stay close, stay loyal, stay useful, because being needed felt like the closest thing to being loved. I didn't realize how wrong that belief was until I stepped outside it, until I built something without them hovering overhead, making sure I never stood too tall. I used to think their approval was oxygen, but it turns out I'd just been taught to breathe in smog and call it fresh air. After I blocked Jenna, the silence came again. But this time, it wasn't unnerving. It was confirmation. They had nothing left to take from me, no emotional hold to exploit, no financial leverage to dangle. I'd walked away clean. My apartment felt more like home every day. I finally had real furniture. Nothing borrowed, nothing scavenged, nothing purchased under obligation. My mornings weren't about bracing for chaos anymore. They were calm. A coffee, a quiet scroll through headlines, a walk if the weather allowed. I stopped waiting for the next emergency that only I could solve. My job? Better than I ever expected. I'd been promoted again after my 6-month review, this time to lead supervisor, with full oversight of our regional projects. The pay was solid. The benefits were real. The respect? That was everything. I walked into the office without fear of being blamed for something I didn't cause, without the pressure of picking up someone else's slack while they got the credit. My new team actually thanked me when I helped. That alone was worth more than every empty promise my father had ever made. I bought a car. Not a status symbol, just something reliable and mine. I traveled more. Short trips at first. Seattle, Santa Fe, then a week up the coast with Camille. We stayed in cheap cabins and spent more on food than on lodging because we actually cared about experiences instead of appearances. I started taking my camera everywhere, not because I thought I'd become a professional photographer, but because I liked capturing moments no one else noticed. Small things, real things, nothing curated for anyone else's approval. One night, while editing a few shots from a mountain trail we'd hiked, I got a message from my Aunt Reba. She never called late unless it was something important. I answered immediately. "Your parents are in trouble," she said, not even bothering with small talk. "The business is hanging by a thread. Your dad's been begging banks for another loan. Your mom's been crying to everyone who'll listen. They had to fire 2 employees last month. Jenna's moved back home permanently." I waited for the punchline, but there wasn't one. Just the raw mess they'd made of everything. "I'm not telling you this to guilt you," she added quickly, almost defensively. "I just thought you should know how bad it's gotten." I thanked her and hung up. I didn't say much after that. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel victorious either. What I felt was distance, and it was beautiful. Their collapse wasn't mine anymore. Their fire wasn't burning down my life. For once, I was standing far enough away to just watch the smoke curl upward and vanish. There was something deeply satisfying about that. Not cruel, just quiet confirmation that I'd made the right decision when it mattered. Weeks passed, then months. The longer I stayed silent, the less I thought about them. Camille and I kept building our own rhythm. I started volunteering at a local workshop that taught photography to at-risk teens, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time or energy for before. I made friends who didn't know anything about my family, people who liked me for me, not for how useful I was or what I could provide. For the first time in my life, I wasn't a background character in someone else's script. I was living my own story. Then, one afternoon, I got another unknown number calling. I didn't answer, but I checked the voicemail afterward. My mother's voice came through the speaker, shaky, unsure, softer than I'd ever heard it. "Marcus, we're sorry. I know we've done terrible things. I just miss you. Please, if there's a way to talk, even just once, please call me back." I deleted it. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. But because I knew better now. That wasn't an apology. That was desperation. There was no accountability in her voice. Just fear. And fear doesn't fix what years of willful damage has done. Camille was sitting across the room when I did it. She didn't say anything. Just looked at me with this quiet understanding that said everything she needed to. Later that night, while we were cooking, she finally asked me something she hadn't before. "Do you think they ever really saw you?" I thought about that for a long moment, stirring the pot absently. I think they saw what they needed. And the second I stopped being useful, I stopped being real to them. She nodded slowly. "That's a hard thing to carry." I met her eyes. "Not anymore." Time kept moving. Promotions came. Projects launched. Camille and I moved into a bigger place together. We hosted friends. We laughed more than I ever thought I could. I still thought about the past sometimes, but only in passing, like checking a scar and realizing it doesn't hurt anymore. Every now and then, I'd hear from Aunt Reba. They're still struggling, she'd say, or your dad had to sell the truck, or your mom's trying to start a candle business. I'd listen, nod, then go right back to living. A year to the day after I walked out of that airport alone, I was standing on a cliff in Oregon, camera in hand, watching the sun drop below the horizon in absolute silence. No phone in my pocket, no voices in my ear, just the wind and the waves and the feeling that I had finally stepped fully into my own life. I took a photo without thinking, just muscle memory now, and looked at the screen. It wasn't perfect. The light was uneven. The angle was off, but it was mine. And for the first time in 32 years, that was enough.